How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. I am delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, be glad to have you. We've got to begin. Not with crime in D.C. We're going to get to crime in D.C. because there's more information out, including some stunning audio from Joe Biden back in the day that I've got. But no, we have to begin with the nuns. If you study communist society, and listen, I know the moment you dive into, it's the communists or whatever, you get into problems. People immediately tune you out. But there actually are problems with the communist implementation of policy by people inside the United States, by ardent progressives. One of the things you have to understand about the process of communist political theory, Marxist political theory, let's just say Marxist political theory, because it is Marxist political theory, is that we were talking about this on our morning team call over this story. And one of the things you have to understand about Marxist political theory is that dragging people through the process repeatedly is a form of punishment. And it's a particular form of punishment for people who follow the law when the policymakers don't like the law, but they can't change it. So let me give you a very famous example. In Moscow in the 1970s, the Soviet Constitution had a free speech clause and a free press clause that was broader, more expansive, and more detailed than the American Constitution. So you know what the First Amendment says? Congress shall pass no law that restricts your right to free speech or the freedom of the press. The Soviet Constitution was very detailed, multiple paragraphs. The government is not allowed to censor what people think. They're not allowed to censor what people say. They're not allowed to censor what people write. They're not allowed to censor the press. The press is free and complete. The press is the check on the bourgeois and the proletariat, and on and on and on and on and on it went. And yet they didn't have a free press. What did they do? If a reporter wrote a story that was unflattering, they couldn't stop the person. But they could repeatedly drag that person before courts. They could drag that person before regulators. They could push that person out of their government-controlled house into the streets. They could make that person's life miserable, and they could go time and time and time again, burdening the person, hoping that the person gives up. It wasn't about the state winning the case. It was about making the life of the people who stood up to the state so miserable that others gave up the fight. And in many cases, the Soviets, if someone refused to give up the fight and became a bit of a martyr, they would just disappear the person. I bring you to the Little Sisters of the Poor. You're thinking, Erickson, didn't the Little Sisters of the Poor win? Yes. The Little Sisters of the Poor won protection against the federal government forcing them under Obamacare to pay for abortion in 2016. And in 2017, a new federal rule was drafted that exempted groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor from the mandate. So in 2016, the Little Sisters of the Poor won their lawsuit against Barack Obama. In 2017, Donald Trump becomes president, and they write a new rule exempting religious groups from and small businesses that are run as Christians from having to pay for abortion under federal control. So progressive states sue against that rule to still try to force Little Sisters of the Poor to pay for abortions. Even though the Supreme Court said they don't have to, what the states do is they go after the new rule. In a nationwide ruling against a Trump administration conscience rule, a federal district judge today has ruled against the Little Sisters of the Poor. The court sided with Pennsylvania and New Jersey in their years-long effort to force the Little Sisters of the Poor to provide contraceptive and abortion coverage in their health care plan. The ruling keeps the effort alive, and the Little Sisters of the Poor have to appeal again. They've been in court since they won. Progressives know they're not going to win the case. They've seen the Supreme Court has sided with Catholic religious charities in Philadelphia. They've sided with Catholic charities in Illinois. They've sided with Catholic homeschoolers. They've sided with Protestant groups. They have sided with religious groups. They've sided with Hobby Lobby. That's not the point. That's not the point. Progressives are dragging Little Sisters of the Poor through because the progressives insist that they must pay. They must be made an example of. Their funding must be used. Conservative groups' funding them must be bled dry in hopes of discouraging others in the future. Little Sisters of the Poor, let me read you this from the Becket Fund. Little Sisters of the Poor are an order of Catholic nuns who have cared for the elderly poor for nearly 200 years. They've been in court for over 14 years fighting for protection from the contraception mandate, which requires them either provide services like the week after abortion pill in their health care plan or pay tens of millions of dollars in fines. 14 years ago, the Federal Department of Health and Human Services issued a federal mandate as part of the Affordable Care Act requiring employers to provide contraceptives like the week after pill, including some that cause abortion, in their health insurance plans. The mandate did not give a religious exemption. In 2016, Little Sisters of the Poor won protection, and in 2017, a new federal rule was created based on the Supreme Court decision. Multiple state governments decided to sue over the new rule. In 2020, the Little Sisters of the Poor went back to the United States Supreme Court, securing protection from the mandate. But Pennsylvania and New Jersey have continued to fight in court to strip Little Sisters of the Poor of that protection. The Little Sisters of the Poor dedicate their lives to caring for the elderly poor until God calls them home. This will cause the fight to continue for their right to carry out their mission without violating their faith. The district court blessed an out-of-court effort by Pennsylvania and New Jersey to attack the Little Sisters and religious liberty. The nuns are fighting to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals now. According to the Becket Fund, they write this: "It is absurd to think the Little Sisters of the Poor might need yet another trip to the Supreme Court to end what has now been a dozen years of litigation over the same issue." Again and again and again. It's a kangaroo court. It is what Marxists do. This, by the way, you should notice Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro is the Democratic governor of Pennsylvania who himself has been targeted by anti-Semitic extremists, and he himself is an anti-Christian bigot. Josh Shapiro is the governor who, when he was in charge as the attorney general and in dealing with Philadelphia, refused to allow Catholic charities to participate in adoptions in Pennsylvania unless the Catholic charities placed babies in same-sex households, which the Catholic Church won't do. Josh Shapiro hates Catholics. A man who himself is a victim of religious discrimination should not be religiously discriminating, but Josh Shapiro hates Catholics and particularly hates Christians generally, but particularly hates the Catholics. And so Josh Shapiro is using the full force of taxpayer dollars in Pennsylvania to persecute nuns. Josh Shapiro is. He's lionized by the press, who ignore the fact that he's an anti-Christian bigot himself. Oh, Josh Shapiro, someone tried to burn down his house and kill him because they were an anti-Semite. Josh Shapiro is trying to burn down Christianity in the United States using taxpayer dollars to do it. I've condemned the attacks on Josh Shapiro. Will no one in the press condemn him for his anti-Christian bigotry? Of course not, because they think the nuns should pay for abortion too, the people in the press. This happens time and time again. The National Press Corps in this country favors, lionizes, and worships progressives who hate Christians. There have been a massive uptick, more than 400 churches in the country vandalized in the last year. There's been a massive uptick. And this isn't just with Little Sisters of the Poor. So another left-wing judge has decided to ignore the United States Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court ordered on the emergency docket for DOJ to have access to federal information. Let me read you what a federal judge has now said. The Supreme Court's unreasoned stay order issued on the emergency docket does not make or signal any change in controlling law warranting the relief of the defendant's request. This is Judge John, who is a Biden appointee. He's allowing an injunction on a case, even though the Supreme Court stayed his companion injunction in a separate case. He's relying on an older Supreme Court case that the Supreme Court has actually overruled recently. This is the case about whether the Department of Education can proceed with its reduction in force based on the DOJ data. If you think this has already been ruled on, it has by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that the reduction in force by the Department of Education can go forward. And this judge is saying, I don't care what the Supreme Court says. I'm not letting it happen. That's basically, in English, that's what he's saying, that the Supreme Court ruled, but there are two cases relating to the same thing, and I have both of the cases. And the Supreme Court decision was on that one case, but not this case, so I'm not letting what the Supreme Court said can go forward happen because they haven't ruled on this case. They're trying to drag it out. This is the constitutional crisis the left has been talking about. They're keeping Catholic nuns in court for more than 12 years to force them to do what the Supreme Court has said they don't have to do. They're denying Donald Trump's efforts to reduce the size of the federal government because the Supreme Court has said he has the power. And they're like, well, they said it in that other case, not this case. I'm going to make them say it in this case, too. The judges are undermining people's trust in the federal judiciary. There are clear Supreme Court precedents here. And the progressive judges appointed by Joe Biden are saying, I don't care about those precedents. They're opening the door up to dangerous precedents of people on the right behaving the same way. They're opening up they're playing a dangerous game here. And they're going to get more of their power stripped by the United States Supreme Court as well. But you've got to understand it's the process that's the punishment. It's a very Marxist thing. Forcing people to work their way through the judiciary to get to an outcome that they never should have had to go to the judiciary to get. Making them spend their money. And then when they get the outcome they want, forcing them through the process all over again on a technicality. On a variation of the same thing. It's what's happening with Little Sisters of the Poor. It's what's happening with the Trump administration. It's progressive Marxists using the Marxist playbook of punishment through process. If you keep Sisyphus rolling the rock up the hill, only to have it roll down again, that's a punishment. The rock gets to the top of the hill, but then you shove it down again and say, do it all over again, Sisyphus. The nuns made it to the top of the hill. They got to the highest court of the land and they won. And Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, an anti-Christian bigot, shoved the rock down the hill and said, roll it back up the hill again, nuns. And they did, and they won. And Shapiro, a third time, has shoved the rock down the hill and said, do it again, nuns. They'll get to the top of the hill again, and Josh Shapiro will find a way to shove the rock down the hill again and make them do it all over again. It's a Sisyphean attack. It's a Sisyphean punishment. Same here. The Donald Trump administration got all the way to the highest court of the land, and they said the Department of Education can be downsized. And the very same judge the Supreme Court told to downsize it shoved the rock down the hill and again and said, well, okay, that was one case, but I have two cases on the exact same matter, the exact same situation. They ruled on the one case, not the other case. Roll the rock up the hill again, Donald Trump. The process is the punishment in Marxist political philosophy, and that's what we're seeing play out in the country right now. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here, 877-973-7425. So here in Georgia, where I am, they're building a massive Rivian facility. That's the electric vehicle maker. They specialize in SUVs and trucks. My kids and I, every time, and I know I have a few listeners who have the Tesla Cybertruck, but boy, do we make jokes about it. Villages lose idiots. They also lose, they lose easily manipulated people, and you can tell which ones there are by the cyber. They're just hideous vehicles. They're not really trucks. I've only one time seen anyone ever use one as a truck. I think people just want it because it's this ostentatious display of guess which side of the aisle I'm on. They're hideous looking vehicles. Are they cool technology? Yes, and I love technology and buttons and screens and all that, but they're ugly. They are objectively an ugly vehicle. And if you don't think it's an ugly vehicle, you probably look at the toilet seat hanging on the wall and think that's priceless work of art. You got no taste if you're buying one of these things. They're hideous. I really, really dislike the Cybertruck. It is a hideous looking vehicle. And I'm sorry to offend you. And if you have one and love it, God bless you. That's fine, but you got no taste. You probably have pink flamingos in your yard too. Now, you know what companies are doing? They're running away from them. So they're building a big Rivian plant in Georgia, and the subsidies for the electric trucks and cars are going away. GM and Ford are now walking away from their major investments in electric trucks in particular, because it turns out that men who buy trucks, other than the Cybertruck, actually want to use them as a truck. They want to pull their boat to the lake, and it turns out that the F-150 Lightning is not very good at towing great distances. It might be able to power your house overnight in a blackout, but it's not going to tow your bass boat to the lake if the lake is too far. And the companies are finally realizing they made a bad investment, and they're beginning to walk away, and electric vehicle tax credits are going away, and the market for electric vehicles has shrunk dramatically in the last 6 months. Of course, I could have told you that was going to happen. Nobody wants these things. I mean, yes, there are people who do, but most people don't. Now, let me tell you about Swiss America. They have been warning people for quite a while about a secret war on cash. The federal government, in addition to trying to control you through tax credits and tax breaks and things like that, they're trying to control you by steering you towards credit and debit purchases so they can track your transactions better. Cash is anonymous, credit and debit is not, and they're trying to make cash and crypto not anonymous either. Swiss America has been warning about the secret war on cash. You can get their report completely free by calling or texting 800-289-2646. The all-out war on cash includes digital forms of currency, and it's spreading. All you do to get this free report takes less than 15 minutes to read is mention my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K. When you call or text 800-289-2646, that's 800-289-2646. Just follow the link. They text back. You can also go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric, SwissAmerica.com/ERICK. Let Swiss America help you navigate the secret war on cash. Message and data rates may apply. Greetings. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson. The phone number 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. Program note for you, by the way. Tomorrow I'm going to be broadcasting from Jacksonville, Florida. I'm going to be doing my show, and then I'm going to be doing much like I did in Atlanta with their with their Carathon for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I'm going to be doing the Children's Cancer Fund fundraiser for WOKV, my affiliate down in Jacksonville. So it'll be 6 hours of radio for me tomorrow, and then I fly back home. And I always get asked, why don't you just drive? It's like 4 hours from my house. But those are 4 hours where I'm behind the wheel and can't be working. So I can go to the airport, get on a plane, and actually get a lot of work done. So I'm flying Delta, not private. I wish that would be convenient, wouldn't it? Not there yet. Hopefully one day. But nonetheless, I'll be in Jacksonville tomorrow doing my show and participating in their Carathon, and then back in studio on Monday. All that being said, though, I doubt I'm going to be able to do phone calls tomorrow because I don't know what the setup's going to be for that. So probably we should treat this as an open line day. Before I take any phone calls, though, I have to talk about some other significant news out there, including, this wild story. Now, I gotta say that this isn't nut picking. You know what? And this is something that both sides do. You find the most insane person on the other side, and you use that person as the example of everyone. The left does it, the right does it. Someone some years ago called it nut picking. Find the nut and say everybody on that side is like that. This isn't nut picking, and it's not nut picking because this is the New York Times op-ed page. And these are not nuts. This is Stephen Simon, who held senior positions in the State Department and the National Security Council, and Jonathan Stevenson, who served on the National Security Council staff during the Obama administration. And they're writing this in the New York Times. By ordering 800 National Guard troops to Washington on the pretext of an illusory crime wave, President Trump has further dragged the United States military into domestic law enforcement in a move credibly perceived as an ominous test case. This continues what the administration started in California in June as part of its deportation efforts. Unfortunately, though we and others, pay attention to this, though we and others had hoped that the military would only respond to calls to action in American cities and states kicking and screaming, we no longer expect resistance from the institution. Once, perhaps, traditionalist officers might have leaned on protocol and refused to heed a lawless order, taking inspiration from the generals Mark Milley and James Mattis, who resisted the uprooting of established military standards in the first Trump term. But today, general officers no longer seem to see themselves as guardians of the constitutional order. It now seems clear to us the military will not rescue Americans from Mr. Trump's misuse of the nation's military capabilities. Recent changes to the terms of the military's employment by the Pentagon and its members' incentives to career advancement will ultimately overcome any constitutional and moral qualms about their conduct. Democratic civilian control and the apolitical professionalism of military officers has long been a bulwark against authoritarianism. The framework proved stable through the 20th century, even when tested by the Vietnam War, in significant part because American presidents and their civilian advisors could be trusted not to imperil the political integrity of the republic. Mr. Trump, however, has challenged this civil military calculus since the military resisted his efforts to use active duty personnel against Black Lives Matter protesters in 2020. Liberals have put their faith in the military as a last line of defense against a rogue executive branch. Oh, it goes on and on and on from there. And then, of course, it ends up with this could go to the Supreme Court, but they have shown scant enthusiasm for stopping Mr. Trump. There's a word that is not used but is strongly implied here. They wanted a coup. Stephen Simon teaches at Dartmouth now. Jonathan Stevenson is a senior fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies and managing editor of Survival. They are all but saying they want a military coup. These are progressives who wanted a military coup. It's nice that they're finally being open about it. They still can't bring themselves to say the word, but it's essentially they wanted a coup, and this is their red flag in now the New York Times, of all places. This is not nut picking. These are serious people who are involved in Democratic White Houses, writing in the New York Times that telling Democrats the military is not going to save us from Donald Trump. The military was never going to save you from Donald Trump. So let's talk about fan fiction. Let's talk about fan fiction. 50 Shades of Grey, the novel series turned into a series of movies. It was like online writing, and it wasn't just that. It was there were other fan fictions been turned into movies and TV shows and stuff. What was the Twilight series? All the fan fiction around it and whatnot. And this is something that the left took over, where they could take a novel or they could take a concept that was in pop culture and they could start writing about it online and share it with friends and self-publish and get it on Amazon. And it was this entire fantasy genre that was fan fiction, and it spun off into politics. The left got it in their head that their fantasies could become reality. They have fantasized about a military coup against Donald Trump. They really, in their head, they've wanted the military to stop Donald Trump. It's what they've wanted. They've been pretty explicit about it, and now more explicit than ever with this piece in the New York Times, and it's not going to happen. And these guys are now telling the Democrats and the progressives on the pages of the New York Times, guys, our fantasy is not going to become reality now. They're not going to have a coup. They're going to go along with it. What are they going to go along with? The president deployed Marines to Los Angeles. What did the Marines actually do in L.A.? Do you have any idea? They protected a federal facility that Antifa activists were attacking. That's it. They didn't round up illegals. They didn't arrest people. They protected a federal facility. What did the National Guard do? The National Guard did mostly the same thing, with some efforts to round up illegal aliens. They're trying to get hysterical about Washington, D.C. again at the very beginning of the piece by ordering 800 National Guard troops to Washington on the pretext of an illusory crime wave. It's not illusory. It's real. They just don't want to admit it because they're white people who never have to experience it. President Trump has further dragged the U.S. military into domestic law enforcement. The National Guard troops can be summoned by the President of the United States. Remember, they were angry Donald Trump didn't summon them quickly enough on January 6th. Now they're angry he summoned them too quickly in Washington, D.C. for this. He can't win for losing. Can't win for trying. And they're upset about it. You know they're going to head to violence, right? They're going to head to violence. They can't help themselves. I mean, this is essentially the second to last step, is it not? They thought the military would be the ones to get their hands dirty, and they're basically now saying that there's no way. The military's not doing it. Listen to this. This is at the end. The danger of escalation is real. Soldiers and Marines are trained for combat, not constabulary duty and riot control. Expecting military personnel to shift seamlessly from destroying an enemy on the battlefield to law enforcement is asking for trouble. And the deployment of troops to urban areas may provoke clashes with citizens who may be motivated to pick up a gun. Once shots are fired at military personnel, no matter where the shots come from, the administration will have the pretext it needs to tighten its grip using instruments of state control. That might sound far-fetched, but it can be spun out of control. It may be left to the Supreme Court to enforce constitutional discipline on the U.S. Armed Forces. Gavin Newsom of California's lawsuit challenging Mr. Trump's deployment of the National Guard troops is working its way through the federal judicial system, where Gavin Newsom keeps losing, by the way. The district court initially ruled in California's favor, but the Court of Appeals quickly ruled for the federal government. That would be the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the most liberal circuit in the nation. But the Supreme Court, which has shown scant enthusiasm for curbing presidential power, could just as easily rule for the Trump administration. The military would be unlikely to challenge the president, and his power would become that much more entrenched. The last best hope may be a broadly applicable, unanimous decision upholding the district court's ruling that even Mr. Trump would feel compelled to respect. Again, that is fan fiction by the Democrats. Oh, the 9 justices of the Supreme Court, they're going to stand up to Donald Trump and tell him no. They've been standing up to Donald Trump repeatedly, but they've also handed him some wins because they're not involved in your sick fan fiction. And you know where this leads. It leads to the Democrats saying, we tried the court, they failed. We tried the states, they failed. We tried the military, they failed. It's time to get guns and fight. That's where this heads. And I want you to pay attention to something. What are the 2 triggers? The 2 triggers in this piece, A crime wave in Washington, D.C., these guys refuse to recognize because they're lily-white progressives who don't get affected by it. And illegal immigration that doesn't affect their jobs. Is it not insane to you? It is to me. It's genuinely insane to me that the two triggers for the left right now are that Donald Trump is attacking illegal immigration and Donald Trump is attacking crime in Washington, D.C. Those are the triggers that have the left worked into a frenzy and wanting a coup because the president is taking law and order seriously. That's look, I'm not making that up. It's here. They're upset that he sent Marines to Los Angeles. What did the Marines do? Do they not even know what the Marines did? Did they listen to MSNBC and come away with some fan fiction theory of what the Marines literally protected federal property? That's what the Marines did. The Marines were not parading through Los Angeles looking for illegal aliens. That did not happen. But they seem to suggest that it did. They seem to suggest that the Marines were engaged in a law enforcement effort. The Marines were engaged in protecting federal property. When inside your bubble you begin to believe the mythologies, bad things begin to happen. When you begin to believe the mythologies are the real things and your fan fiction develops around the mythologies, you have a screwed up way of looking at the world. And you become more and more willing to deploy violence. You become more and more willing to embrace the things the guardrails of society have put up around us to protect us. And you've decided to argue that Trump has shattered all the guardrails, and so you're intending to run outside them. That's what's happening here. They're going to provoke violence. The New York Times is going to provoke violence. And their argument for Democrats taking pot shots, physical armed pot shots at Republicans is, well, we thought the military would do it for us and they won't, so we're going to have to do it. That's where this heads. I know where this heads. I know where these people are thinking. They're turning violent before our very eyes because they concocted a fan fiction that was not reality. They lived in the dream and they're waking to a reality that is they lost. And Democrats can't abide losing. Progressives need power to accomplish their agenda. They don't have it right now. And if they can't take it, they're going to take away the lives of those who do. The Democrats are turning violent. It's sad to see that much brokenness because they treated politics as their god, and their gods have failed them. Don't let your computer fail you. Call Vision Computers so it doesn't. They can build you a computer that stays online, keeps you going, and if you ever have a question, ever run into a problem, you call them, 15 seconds or less. Somebody's on the phone with you taking care of it. 404-COMPUTE's the number, 404-COMPUTE, or go to visioncomputers.com, visioncomputers.com. Tell them Eric sent you. They'll save you some money there. If you just want their world-class tech support, you can get it for $199 a year per computer for your home or your office. If you're in the gig economy, you sit at the coffee shop all day working, and you need somebody to be able to be your IT guru, Vision can do it, $199 a year. If you're a company and you've got managed IT services, they may be able to save you some money. And unlike your present IT system, where your employees are filing emailed tickets, with Vision, they get a phone number they call, they get somebody on the phone, so their downtime is less, then they stay productive more. Call them at 404-COMPUTE. Tell them Eric sent you. 404-COMPUTE, or go to visioncomputers.com. I gotta stop. I'm hitting my record button instead of the sounder. Sorry, folks. Bad on me. All my wires are tangled here. Now, here's the sounder. Greetings, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Let me jump to Glenn's phone call here. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Doing fine. Hey, do you want to hear the one reason why you should buy an Eden Pure?
What's that?
I put them in my bathroom, and somebody goes number 2, I go in there, close the door, turn it on, in 30 seconds, gone.
There you go.
That is
sell it for me.
Okay, so you were talking about judicial stuff. I just wanted to say there needs to be accountability, consequences, and hard guidelines. We have these judges. They're allowing this CFIUS thing where they're using the system to punish. We had a judge that just released a guy after 6 months on a 14-year sentence, and he went and he kidnapped a family, and he stabbed the woman after he got money. there's no accountability. Without accountability, there's not going to be any fix there. Anyway, Hammurabi's code. If you built if I would design a pressure vessel like ASME code, so I do something by code and I violate the code repeatedly, I lose my license. There needs to be accountability. Mm-hmm. You can't wait for it just to be on an election. It needs to be a way of doing it.
Part of the problem here, Glenn, is that with these federal judges with lifetime appointments, there's got to be impeachment for some of them. I mean, look at the judge in Massachusetts, the Biden-appointed judge. Congress decides to cut the funding to Planned Parenthood, and she says Congress isn't allowed to cut the funding to Planned Parenthood. Yeah, Congress can cut the funding to Planned Parenthood. That's not a so the president and the vice president, the executive branch, can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. It says to the judiciary that they have their tenure for a period of good behavior. It's not good behavior when the judiciary decides that the power of the purse can be stripped from Congress by judicial fiat. Impeach the judge. It's not good judicial behavior when a judge tells the Supreme Court, I don't like what you did, so I'm not going to apply it to these other cases, even though they're the same sort of case. That's not good behavior. Judges need to be impeached. And congressional Republicans aren't going to do it is part of the problem. Now, look, there are a lot more. The reason they're not going to do it, honestly, is you and me, because there are a lot of judicial decisions you and I disagree with, and we're going to say, well, impeach them. So they're not going to start with the people who clearly need to be impeached, because a lot of the base of the party won't be able to nuance and distinguish between those who justifiably do it and because they have breached real judicial ethics, and those who decide, well, I don't like the ruling, so impeach them. It doesn't matter if you like the ruling. Sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you lose the case. But neither side wants to distinguish stuff like that and nuance it. So the Republicans will not impeach these federal judges because they know if they begin, the base is going to go to an extreme that the Republicans are not willing to go to. So why bother starting? That's the problem. It's on you and me. If you've got to recognize that there are plenty of progressive judges who are going to rule against you, but they do so within the bounds of the law. And if you can't distinguish the bounds of the law that allow them to get away with it versus those when they operate outside the bounds, it's going to end badly for all of us. So Republicans refuse to go down that path. When we come back, wholesale inflation numbers not looking good. Let me explain the data to you.